Hello everybody, my name's John Moore. I'm the Managing Director of the IoT Security Foundation. It's an honour for me to share a platform with some of my colleagues which I've worked throughout the year with, but also a great honour for me to present the work of the IoT Security Foundation members. This is a selected summary. We only have 15 minutes, but hopefully you'll get a flavour of the many areas that we're covering. Before I jump into the content of my talk, there's two observations that I would just like to start with when I talk about IoT security. The first one, after looking at this space for nearly 5 years now, I am ultimately confident that IoT security can only be described as a wicked challenge. And what I mean by that is we can't completely solve it, but we can address and mitigate many of the vulnerabilities. The second thing, which is stating the bleeding obvious, but IoT security doesn't stop at borders. So this is very much an international effort, and that's reflected in our membership and the way that we work as an organisation. So here's the agenda. I'm going to just do a very quick recap on who we are and what we do. The main part of the talk is the selected highlights, basically how we're doing what we do. And if that hasn't got you on the edge of your seats full of energy, I'm going to invite our chairman up at the end just to talk a little bit about where we're going in the future. So, here we go. IoT Security Foundation was established in 2015. We are the relative new kid on the block in terms of TechWorks communities. We were started with a simple mission to make it safe to connect in the era of IoT. And we do that, of course, to enable both social and economic benefits, and of course for our members, business benefits too. As an organisation, today we stand at 113 corporate members. We also have 68 professional contributing members. We're organised with a steering group, a plenary membership, and priority working groups. And for certainly the executive steering board and the plenary, we tend to meet 4 to 6 times a year, sometimes face-to-face, sometimes virtually. Each of the working groups sets their own timetable of when they meet. The ecosystem that we serve has stakeholders which not only includes providers and consumers of security, but also those who have what I would term a fiduciary responsibility, i.e. protecting others, and of course I'm referring to governments and regulators. So in terms of our work, our core efforts are to raise awareness, to drive assurance in the marketplace, and increase the security maturity of industry. Our core product is producing and promoting best practices and examples of what good looks like. And increasingly, as I'll explain later, we're also looking to go beyond this. Our work covers policy, standards, compliance, governance, organisational processes, purchasing, supply chains, research, and of course, technology. We have majored in consumer and enterprise, but we certainly have interests in other areas such as healthcare and of course automotive. Here's a representation of some of the materials that we produce. The IoT Security Foundation Steering Board made a decision early on that we would aim to provide our guidance materials for free because cost is a barrier to adopting best practice. The compliance framework we have produced and maintain is the foundation of our work. It is essentially a checklist that covers all aspects of security, from business process to hardware and software stacks to supply chain management. And I'll speak a little bit more later on how it's intended to be used. We also have secure design best practice guides, examples of good architecture in the home, enterprise and healthcare. We have produced reports on vulnerability disclosure use and what the regulatory landscape looks like globally. We also produced a white paper on smart buildings this summer, really as a teaser to gain interest in the working group of the same name. And we were delighted by the response that got, and also the plans for the Smart Buildings Working Group going into 2020. So, Who is downloading our materials and where are they? Well, I'm absolutely delighted to say that we're very proud that over the last 7 months, from March to September this year, we've had over 13,000 downloads across our materials, with the compliance framework being the most popular. In terms of regions, Europe, USA and India show the strongest interest, but I have to say that Asia is also rising, and it's worth pointing out that all our materials are published in English only at this point in time. It's also very important that we build strategic relationships with policymakers and regulators to ensure that industry has a voice. Starting with the UK, we have worked extensively with DCMS on consumer-related issues. First with the Code of Practice, then the ETSI technical spec, and now the EN standard and what will follow in terms of regulation. I'm delighted that we no longer have to knock on the door of government, they come knocking on our door. By virtue of the work we've been doing with DCMS, you'll be interested to know that government departments do talk to each other, and we've also been consulted by BEIS, who have got us our thoughts on 2 related directives, the Sale of Goods directive and the Digital Content Directive. And of course, although I'm not going to talk too much about it, we maintain a very healthy relationship with the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre. I'm not going to say too much about this slide, but I do think whilst I have you here, it is worth mentioning that we also have a seat on the steering group for the Digital Security by Design Advisory Group. That's a £70 million Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, which is a little different from our regular work of best practice. In fact, this is really looking at future research, really down at the foundational level of computing. And there's a picture there of John Goodacre, who launched the challenge. And when he called me up over the summer and invited IoTSF to take a seat, he really did tantalise my interest, because as an expired microprocessor systems engineer, I can see what we're talking about in this challenge fund really will change the future prospects of secure smart systems in the future. So we'll be delighted to have a voice in that. As I said at the beginning, IoT security is international by definition, and therefore it's important we collaborate and build international relationships. In Europe, ENISA is the key relationship that we're investing in, and after attending some of their events in prior years, I was delighted to go out and meet them at their offices in Athens in February. Brexit, remember that? Yes, that was mentioned, but that was quickly dispensed with because security requires international collaboration and IoTSF has an international membership. The meeting was very useful. In fact, we quickly established a common philosophy and mindset, and we set about thinking how we might work together. The simplest of steps that we could take was to field speakers at our respective conferences. So I'm delighted to say that our chair, Stephen Pattison, did a superb job in bringing some energy and purpose to the slot at the recent ENISA Europol conference, again in Athens. A very important platform for us, where we received a very warm welcome, and not just due to the weather. Also on the European front, the Cybersecurity Act was enacted on June the 27th this year. It's essentially a European-wide certification framework which holds primacy over national schemes. We were encouraged to apply and we asked our membership if there were any volunteers, and I'm delighted to say that Dr. Stefan Spitz stepped forward and he will represent us. We're not sure whether we've got a seat yet on that, but fingers crossed we should learn later this month. This not only gives us an opportunity to influence policy into Europe, but it also gives us an insight into what's coming down the line. What about the US? What are we doing there? Our efforts have not gone unnoticed, and our compliance framework has been a reference source for the recent draft paper published by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I'm very pleased to say that one of its authors, Kat Magas, took part in last year's IoTSF conference, and we met once again out at the ENISA conference, and I'm delighted to say that there's a lot of appetite to continue the collaboration. Whilst the ENISA references and the NIST references of the IoTSF work are important, it's by no means isolated. Once again, we're very proud to have our work included in a recent report from TNO, which was commissioned by the governments of Singapore and Holland. IoTSF features throughout, and aside from our own interests, it's an exceptional read for anybody who wants to know what the landscape looks like in IoT security. Needless to say, you can see from the slide there, I'm very pleased to boast that we cover more areas in the table than any other group identified. Yes. Whilst I have you here, and we're amongst the TechWorks family, I wanted to say a few words on our non-profit business model and how we see it evolving, possibly across our sibling communities. As you'll be aware, we derive income through membership subscriptions. We do our very best, trust me, to keep fees as low as possible, and we'll continue to do that. However, it is a challenge, for this only provides us enough revenue for basic operations. It doesn't really allow us to drive our mission in areas we know are important. Therefore, we either increase fees, we don't think that would be very popular, we attract lots more members, that's an option, or we need to supplement our income in other ways. We believe the way forward for IoTSF is to seek funding for projects and look at delivering services which accelerate our mission. And most importantly, are seeking opportunities to do this with our members to make it sustainable and equitable. So how might we do this? I've got a few examples to tantalize you, I hope. The first obvious area is training. In fact, when NMI was set up in 1996, it really was set up with a mandate to provide training for operators, and I'm pleased to say that this continues throughout. We piloted our Foundations of IoT Security course in 2017, and this year we sold out the September Windsor course and are close to full for the forthcoming Innsbruck course. I'm pleased to say that we're also discussing other regions too for next year. Not only that, but I'm also pleased to tell you that we have several members to provide more courses covering different aspects and targeting different audiences. As such, we're looking to define a standard model which allows interested members to list courses with IoTSF and be part of our training portfolio. As was mentioned earlier, I'd like to introduce you to the nascent Cyberstone project, which IoTSF, via TechWorks, is a partner. It's actually a £2.7 million project, not £6 million, although I do like the ambition. It's a 2-year collaborative project with IoTSF member Inquiring Minds, Cisco, and the University of Oxford. It's supported with a grant from Innovate UK. Cyberstone aims to create the specifications for and deliver a demonstrator IoT gateway and uses AI, yes, there's the buzzword AI, to mitigate contemporary and emerging threats. The power of Cyberstone, however, can only be realized through collaboration and an ecosystem, hence our interest in this project. We are currently setting this up with Innovate UK and the partners, and are looking forward to breathing life into this. If you want to know more, then Dr. Nick Allett, CEO of Inquiring Minds, will be speaking at our forthcoming conference later this month. Assurance is a major theme within security, and self-assessment and third-party certifications playing a role. The compliance framework, which I spoke about earlier, is intended as a tool to help companies progress along what we call the security ramp. That is, it can be used for an internal assessment, it can be used as part of a vendor agreement, or it can be used as a basis for a third-party lab assessment. However, there's also an intermediate step between self-assessment and full-blown third-party certification, and this is a verified self-certification. Its benefit being it is low cost, but also uses an external party to verify the self-assessment. IoTSF has been working with member organisation, the IASME Consortium, to look at the potential for a verified self-certification baseline scheme. IASME has all the experience needed to deliver such a scheme, having operated the UK government Cyber Essentials scheme since 2014, with over 8,000 certificates issued to date. We're hoping to make further announcements once again at our forthcoming conference later this month, which brings me neatly to what's on the immediate radar. Tonight, we will announce our second IoT Security Champion Award winner. The short list of companies are listed on the slide here. To be a champion, however, requires more than a good product and a good service. It requires true commitment and a duty of care to customers and the wider ecosystem. So good luck to those companies listed here if you're in the room. And of course, I've mentioned several times already, and it would be remiss not to bring it up specifically, that later this month we have our annual conference here in London at the ILEC on November the 26th. We have an exceptionally full agenda. We'll be covering the big picture items such as policy, regulation and assurance, but we'll also have 3 very full technical tracks and some workshops, training workshops alongside 2. One of the boasts that we have at IoTSF is that we are the world's longest running dedicated conference focused on IoT security, having started, of course, back at Bletchley in 2015. So we're all set for the best conference ever. I noticed that on the video, we announced that we had the best numbers already. I like that prediction. Hopefully it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And of course, you're all invited. You'll find details on the flyer, which is out on the tables. So this is my penultimate slide. There's not a day that goes past IoTSF where we don't think about the value that we can offer our members and also to society. And I wanted to give you an illustration about where maybe, actually, the value is subjective, but there's a story I'd like to tell you about a member that we signed earlier this year. I got a call from a global brand, and I spoke to one of their vice presidents, and the chap said to me, "John, you know, it's been 2 years since we spoke. We've been all around the world. We've looked at a number of IoT organisations, but there's none quite like IoTSF. So we'd like to join." Delighted, of course, that they would like to join. But I was also curious because we did talk 2 years ago, and I was struggling to figure out where the value proposition might lie. So I asked, why would you want to come back and join now? And the VP said to me, "Well, John, it's very simple. We are a payments company. We believe there will be many payments made via IoT. So it's vital to us that the IoT is secure. And that is what IoTSF is about, and that's why we want to join." That company was MasterCard. So, quick as you like, we got his credit card and we signed them up. So, one of the other things we did this year was we appointed a new chair. Dr. Stephen Pattison took over from the magnificent Professor Paul Dorey. So I think it's only fitting that I invite Stephen up just to say a few words before we finish about where he sees taking us next year.
One of the things I always say to people I work with or people in my teams if they're going on a training conference is try to come back remembering the 2 things that will change your life. And some of them do and some of them don't. But it means that if you're sitting through presentations of whatever sort, it's a good idea to try to focus on those 2 things that you're going to go away with that will make you stop and think afresh about some of the stuff you took for granted. I'm only going to offer 2 things about IoTSF. And those 2 things are as follows. What IoTSF is really trying to do is, 1, shape the debate on IoT security, and 2, make it as easy as possible for companies to implement IoT security best practice. Shape the debate and make it easy. That's what we're trying to do. And I'm sure you'll agree, both those things are hugely important. You know, we could have a long discussion about IoT and the extent to which it has developed as fast as we thought a few years ago. I think some of us might be inclined to say it hasn't really developed quite as fast as we thought a few years ago. And we could have a long discussion about the reasons for that. But I think one of the reasons for that has been security. has been the need to build trust in these new systems. And if we don't get the security right, IoT will not take off. It will not deliver the benefits we know it can deliver to all of us as companies involved in the sector, and more widely, the benefits it can deliver to society. So that's why this really matters. My next point is that IoTSF has come a long way in the few years since it was set up. But arguably, its moment is now. Now is the moment when increasingly we are finding governments all over the world really interested in how they can try to make sure that IoT is secure for their citizens. And that's what John was alluding to with our involvement in what's happening in Whitehall here in the UK, but in Brussels and in Greece with ENISA, the European Commission's Agency for Security, and increasingly we're getting a foothold in Washington, DC. And the reason we're getting a foothold is that all those people are interested in making the system secure. And that has opportunities and risks, of course. The risk is you get heavy-handed regulation that stifles innovation, that is out of date the minute the ink's dry on the paper, and so on and so forth. The opportunities are, if you get the security framework right, it builds confidence, and that's good for IoT, it's good for business, and it's good for society. So the IoTSF moment really has come, and I think over the next few months we will be interacting with some of those bodies in a very specific and concrete way to try to help shape the debate on regulation or frameworks for codes of practice or whatever it's going to be. We're already having a bit of an impact. It sounds like a bit of a name drop, this next bit, but I happened this morning to go with the ARM CEO to call on the Secretary of State for DCMS, Digital Culture, Media and Sport. And to my surprise, one of the things she said was, what about IoTSF? Well, I was flabbergasted. Fortunately, I knew a tiny bit about it, so I was able to tell her. But we're beginning to get on the radar of some of these people. And our messages to governments are really quite simple. It's, don't overcomplicate, don't overregulate, don't duplicate, avoid fragmentation. Try to make sure that as we go through this process of making it secure, the guidelines, the regulations are uniform across major jurisdictions. And I think we'll get there, and I think IoTSF will find itself a valued source of expertise. The second thing I said at the beginning, so that's the shaping the debate. The second thing I said at the beginning was basically make it simple. Make it as easy as possible for developers, companies, others to build security into their devices, gadgets and processes right from the start. And that's what the compliance framework does. The compliance framework is, in my view, an incredibly important document. It addresses both processes and products and gives people advice on what they should do to try to make sure their products are as secure as possible. It's an evolving document because we all know that this is an evolving area, that the threat's changing, that the technology is developing, but it tries to keep up with industry best practice. It's designed by experts, industry and academic experts, for industry to make it simple. And I think that document has the potential to provide an incredibly important impetus towards driving up not just the demand for, but the supply of secure IoT products in the future. So that's what we'll be trying to do over the next few months. That's where we're trying to take this. I think this really matters, and I think this is a really good time for IoTSF to go out there and advertise its wares and press home its arguments. As John said, if you want to get involved, please do get involved. The compliance document, as John implied, but he didn't dwell on it, but it's an important point. It's a bit like the NHS. It's free at point of use. So use it. But if you want to get involved in helping elaborate it and drive it forward, talk to either John or myself later today. Thank you very much.